Please welcome the president of Made Music, Lauren McGuire.
I'm sure everybody who's hearing this right now is picturing where you are. That's what we do as humans. We take sound, we process it, and we figure out our environment. For humans who hear, this is the organizer of all of our senses. It's really critical as we think about if we're safe, if we're comfortable. It's why you're so much faster to respond to a noisy sound than you are if you put your hand on a pot. Sound actually goes directly to the emotional part of your brain, and you're able to respond to it quickly. That's why sound is so impactful. You can also hear much farther than you can see, smell, or touch. So I'm here as a sound person, and lots of people have said, why are you here? It is going to be a little bit different than most of the other presentations, and we have 10 minutes. So we're going to cover 3 trends as we think about travel, 3 things that our clients and our work are bringing us and how they've been impacted by the pandemic. And we are going to explore those things in this short time, but I want to make sure that I leave you with some tips on how to think about sound as you invest in technology and getting people back out in the world. All right, so the first, spaces. Let's talk about that, and we're going to go back to that idea of organizer of the senses. This is a green space. This is downtown Dallas. It was built mostly during the pandemic and launched during the pandemic. One of the trends that we see is people want to get back to nature during this. They want to experience nature. But this is the sound of downtown Dallas. It doesn't sound like this space looks. And when you think about our ancestors and how they thought about sound, silence or weird sound could mean that an environment was unhealthy. There was a predator in the area, you're in danger. When people see green spaces, they want to understand that it's green. Those are fake birds, fake insects, and fake running water that is quietly piped into this space. Why? Because our subconscious minds think this is how this space should sound to really be a natural experience. As you think about building these spaces, biophilic design we hear more than we ever have before, even as we think about going back to offices. Biophilic design is going to be part of how we're thinking about it because it makes us feel safe and comfortable and like we're in healthy environments. The next thing I just want to touch on is the future of sound and travel. That has been impacted by COVID and the pandemic and how we think about technology and actual modes of transportation. And it's really interesting. I think we've all been trained by media and movies to think about the sound of the future is going to sound like Back to the Future or Blade Runner. This is how autonomous vehicles are going to sound. The thing is, this technology is new, and how are we going to make people comfortable with adopting it? And that's how we think about sound and the balance that we need to create. The example I want to share is Virgin Hyperloop. This is the first new form of mass transportation in 100 years, and the designers went for it. Everything is new, everything is amazing and future forward and really interesting, but how comfortable are people going to be in adopting it? How can sound create a balance to that adoption as we think about travel? So that's what we thought about here. What you're going to hear is organic instrumentation, the opposite of what you might think this is going to sound like. And even more critically, from a build perspective, we're used to those mechanical sounds that you heard, the sounds of planes, of subways. The pods are silent, and that's really weird for us as humans. What we had to do was record the outside of the pod and put it inside the pod at a very low level, but it creates privacy for the travelers, and it honestly helps your body understand that you are traveling at fast speeds. At this point, as technology progresses, we're going to have to start thinking about this from a psychology perspective and faking some of these experiences. So here's a little bit about that.
The sonic journey for Hyperloop begins with the intuitive sounds you hear as you book your travel in the app. When you arrive at your departing station, which Virgin calls a portal, subtle, calming ambiances set an emotional tone while also masking crowd and mechanical noises. All of this creates a feeling of ease. As you make your way into the pod, a relatable sound accompanies the doors closing, and environmental cues like lights down help you settle in for your journey. During travel, a sound notifies you of any important announcements. An arrival sound lets you know that you're nearing your final destination, and the lights up cue energizes you for the end of your journey. Imagine a future where transportation is touchless and anxiety-free. Music and sound will be a critical component of this.
So a lot of that thinking is how we're moving forward on all of the vehicles or transportation that we're helping to design for the future. We have a moment now to understand what our cities are going to sound like 20 years from now, and they don't need to sound like they did 20 years ago for the health of everybody. The last thing I want to talk about is just short form sounds as I try and squeeze all travel sound into 20 minutes. But there's been a lot of talk of technology, of apps, of call centers. Short form sound has big impact. It can help drive brand recognition. It can help create the idea of a fandom, that the person next to you knows that you are a part of ESPN Sports. And it drives memories. That sound has been around a long time. Depending on when you were born, you're either thinking about The Sopranos and Sex and the City or Girls and Game of Thrones. That sound has stayed the same. That's the power of short form sound and brand loyalty. So I want you to think about three things as you think about short form sound and the role it can play for your brand. The first is, like any other design exercise, you can think about a customer journey for sound. How does sound show up as your customers experience your brand? And that's the first place that people start. What's interesting is sound often is the last thing that people think of. And we really want to move that up in the experience. So let me give you an example of what can happen with that, and it brings us to point number 2. Does anybody know what that is? That's the original Apple computer startup sound. It was just the last thing that somebody put into the computer. It's pretty awful. That's what we call sonic trash, and that's point number 2. There's a lot of bad sound out there. You know, the opposite of sound and what we use to design is sonic white space. Make room for silence. If the sound doesn't add to the experience, take it out. And if you can mask sounds, mask them. If you can replace good sounds where you want to drive emotion, do that. So much better, and the sound that so many of us are familiar with. The last point that I want to bring up is to be adaptable. So even we were surprised. The pandemic affected how people subconsciously responded to sound. Commercials were one of the #1 places in June and August. Happy tracks, happy sounds, happy short form sounds that people used to love tanked in terms of emotional appeal. Even the sound of baby laughter went down in how appealing it was on a quantitative scale. We might have been spending too much time with our kids, I'm not sure. But people were in a dark place. And what's interesting about sound is, unlike other areas, you can't lead people where you want them to be. You can't play the happy track and think they're going to get there. In serious times, you really need to meet people where they are. Understand how they're feeling in this moment, meet them there, and then bring them forward. Bring the tracks up in that moment. When you have sound in lobbies or in experiences, be empathetic. So those are the couple of tips I want to give to you. I really thank Skift for having me in the beautiful TWA hotel. Think about sound as you are transforming these experiences for the future. Thank you.